Excuse me, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to look at some of the key turning points in history and looking mainly at military sort of history. The reason being is you get a decision sort of quite quickly that has a lasting effect, unlike, say, a turning point in history that could be the Industrial Revolution in Britain, where that unfolded over a number of decades with consequences that were, went on for many other decades following that. So, but with a military decision, you tend to get a decision within a short space of time. Sometimes in a day or two, or in a few weeks. And so I'll concentrate on that. But the issue here isn't simply they were turning points in history, but they were very close run things. It was very, very close and could have easily turned out very differently. Now, the first one will be the end of Napoleon Bonaparte. I'm starting with that because there's a movie going around about Napoleon and Napoleon's end at Waterloo, the Battle of Waterloo. Now, a few things to note about this. Now, remember, Napoleon's a military genius. There's no one around who's really his equal in terms of military capability. So even though his capacities are sort of showing signs of failing, he's still pretty good and he's still the best on the battlefield. Now, he's facing at Waterloo, he's facing the Duke of Wellington and an army made up of English and Dutch and what today would be Belgian soldiers. So got a bit of a mixed bag there. Now, the Duke of Wellington, that's the English general, his ally is the Prussian general or Field Marshal Blucher. And now Blucher's got 40-odd thousand or so soldiers there. Napoleon realizes that the Prussians will try and come and join up with the British. So he knows that's going to happen. He's worked out which direction they'll come. So he sends 30-odd thousand men under General Grouchy, I think it was, to go and block the Prussians from arriving on the battlefield. So Napoleon's got that worked out. He thinks he can take the British forces at Waterloo. So the battle starts on the big day, and it gets sort of early afternoon, I guess, around late morning, early afternoon. Napoleon is clearly getting the upper hand, and he's got a reserve of 20-odd thousand soldiers, give or take, and he's going to put them in to finish the British off and win the day. Now, it's been a hard-fought battle. Casualties are heavy, so Napoleon won't be in very good condition to fight another battle thereafter. They'll be low on all supplies, a lot of casualties, that sort of thing, and tired men and whatnot. But nonetheless, he's just about to sort of set in train the knockout blow to finish the British off, and the Prussians arrive. And Napoleon must be looking at it going, holy fuck, where did they come from? And what's happened is that the blocking force that Napoleon has sent is probably big enough to engage the Prussians in battle and maybe even defeat them. But the blocking force that Napoleon has sent of French troops under Grouchy to block the Prussians, they kind of dragged their feet and they didn't, they moved rather slowly. They didn't go after it with vigor and determination, and they got a little bit off course. So the Prussians were able to effectively march around them and then come back to Waterloo to the battlefield. Now that arrival, even if the Prussians had been delayed by a few hours from that point, even if that had occurred, that would have been enough for Napoleon to finish off the British. It was that close. And he did have the upper hand, and he did have enough troops and materiel to finish Wellington off. Only the arrival of the Prussians at that time. Now, again, a few hours would all have taken. If Grouchy had been the blocking force, the French blocking force that Napoleon had sent out to stop the Prussians, if Grouchy had been a little bit more energetic and had successfully blocked the Prussians, which was his job, and the Prussians hadn't arrived on the battlefield, or maybe had only arrived the next day, or maybe late that night, it would have been too late. And they, in turn, would have been cut to pieces by the French forces when they appeared. So they'd have had to beat a hasty retreat to stop being annihilated. Now, Napoleon's prospects after Waterloo weren't maybe that good, because Russian armies and Austrian armies were on the way. It's uncertain how long it would have taken them to get there, and just how quickly Napoleon could have reorganised after the victory at Waterloo. More French soldiers would have rushed to the banner and so on. So they possibly could have defeated the incoming armies there, but I don't know. It's unlikely. I think Napoleon would have struggled to hold up against such an onslaught. But look, again, he's a military genius, and possibly he could have pulled it off. But it would have been a tough gig. But that's how tight Waterloo was. Now, just going through history, say the Battle of Britain. So the Nazi Luftwaffe, doing the bombs and attacking the Royal Air Force and so on. Now, the Germans tried various tactics to sort of overwhelm the Royal Air Force, the British Royal Air Force. They underestimated the impact of radar. So as soon as the Luftwaffe crossed the Channel, the British pilots were alerted. The Air Force was alerted, but it still took quite a while for an airplane to go from ground level up to 20,000 feet or whatever the altitude was they needed. So they couldn't be in the air straight away. But the use of radar was underestimated by the Germans, and how advanced the radar had become by the British. So the British were able to concentrate their forces, limited air forces, it turned out, concentrate their forces where the Luftwaffe was concentrated, and where they were coming in from over the continent, European continent. So now, just at the point when the Royal Air Force was about to break, because they didn't have enough planes, they didn't have enough pilots, and they were in pretty bad shape, and it looked like they weren't going to last, and the prognostications were pretty grim, actually, in amongst the Air Force. But just as suddenly as if the Luftwaffe just kept on going what they were doing, they would have won, and won handsomely, and Britain would probably have been invaded. But they switched tactics. They were uncertain of how much they were succeeding, and it appeared, because the radar helped the British concentrate their forces in the key areas where the Luftwaffe were active, it appeared that they had many more planes than they did. And so, but mainly due to uncertainty and the uncertain intelligence that the Germans had access to, meant that they changed their tactics at a time where, if they just stayed with that for another week or so, they would have overwhelmed the Royal Air Force. That's how close it was. It was very, very close. This idea was a stunning victory. It was a draw at best, and it simply prevented the Luftwaffe from gaining control of the skies, but at great cost. And again, a very close run thing. And if the Luftwaffe had kept it up, they would have overwhelmed the Royal Air Force and had complete dominance of the skies. So again, a very close run thing, but a major turning point in history, when Hitler realised that because they needed to control the air in order to launch an invasion. When Hitler realised that wasn't coming, and it was fairly costly as well, and he thought, well, screw that. I'm now interested in going after Russia and the Soviet Union, communist Soviet Union, and let's put that on the drawing board. So really, that was a very close run thing there. Now, staying really with World War II, the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, that was an incredibly close run thing. On a number of occasions, the Nazis came within a whisker of winning that. And even at the outset, they were maybe and they had these resources just in Army Group North going towards Leningrad. Just one brigade of motorized infantry, with some armored cars, and they always had combinations of forces there. Just one brigade of motorized infantry going up the Baltic coastline on the way to Leningrad. That would have been enough to capture Leningrad well within the time frame that they were looking at. Another motorized division on the, if you like, the right-hand side of the force going to Leningrad just one of those would have been enough again to ensure that Leningrad was captured. And if Leningrad was captured early, then the assault on Moscow would have started a few weeks earlier and would have succeeded, and again would have most likely ended the war in that year. That's how close sort of it was. And if we look at, say, even the Stalingrad affair, there had been a major Soviet Red Army offensive further north towards Moscow, further north from where Stalingrad was, and the Nazi intelligence thought that was the only offensive that the Soviets could manage, given the pummeling they'd taken the year before. In fact, they had another 250,000 troops more than the intelligence suggested, and they used that to encircle Stalingrad. Whereas Hitler was very keen, thinking the war's almost over. Let's slow down the conscription. Let's slow down the production of material. The war's almost over. And let's put these factories to making consumer goods for the German public. And Hitler was sort of really keen to all those things. Also giving various armored units that were the spearhead of the mobile armored units, the tanks and so on, giving them vacations and time off, diverting them to other lesser important theatres and that sort of stuff. So that when the strike against Stalingrad came, which was by untrained troops who were all over the place and didn't know what they were doing, bumping into each other, it was a very, very amateurish attempt. But all the Wehrmacht, all the German Nazi troops that were around that existed, that could have easily repulsed and defeated them with great, with inflicting huge casualties, they were all off somewhere else, and days went by before the army reacted. And so again, that defeat of the Soviets at Stalingrad would have probably ended the war. Certainly would have elongated it by the minimum of 12 to 18 months. So those are things also to consider. We can go on to say the Roman Civil War, where Julius Caesar was involved. Now, one of the key players that were opposing Caesar was Pompey the Great, Pompeius Magnus. And they were going to have this, and they were setting up to have this battle in Greece. Phasaelus was the name. Pompey had a numerical advantage, but his troops weren't that experienced. Caesar had more experienced troops, but had about half as many. So Pompey had the better position on this battleground. So Caesar was running low on supplies. Pompey was well supplied, and so he decided to sit it out. And if Caesar wanted to attack, Pompey had a good position. But unfortunately, Pompey's allies, particularly the Eastern allies, were saying, "Hey, you just want to prolong this war so you can act like the big man and stay in charge." And and these were various people from around the Eastern Mediterranean who were his allies, and they didn't really want to sit around. They had shit to do, so they kept pestering him and hustling him into having a battle. And so then the various generals and lieutenants that were there, that Pompey had sort of tenuous control over, were also pushing for battle. And he got to the point where his allies, particularly the ones that were supplying, giving him supplies and food and water and all sorts of things that he needed to stay in the battlefield, they were starting to say, well, if this goes on any longer, we're not going to support this. We're not going to give you supplies and money and material. We're not going to pay these soldiers. So you better get on with it, buddy, and have a battle. Otherwise, we're out of here. So given all that stress, and pestering and threats and so on, Pompey, decided to engage, or pushed. He didn't want to. Decided to engage in battle again with a good general. I mean, Caesar was a great general of his day, and his troops were very experienced. He had Mark Antony as also a very experienced, capable general, and so Pompey's inexperienced troops panicked and ran, and they got routed with heavy losses and so on. So Pompey's decision and his plan to defeat Caesar probably would have worked out, and once defeated, Caesar would have been imprisoned, put to death, and so on. So the outcome of the whole history of the Mediterranean could have been, and I think would have been, very, very different, but for that. So that fateful decision of Pompey's to give in to all the, and those threats were serious. And if your allies that are supplying the money to pay the troops and the food and water and all the material and the weapons and everything, if they're threatening to pull out unless you do what they want, then his position was difficult. And if he'd insisted on no, this is my plan, I'm sticking to it, they probably would have removed him from command and gone ahead anyway. So, but nonetheless, that's how close it was. Now, when I say close, Caesar was probably only several days away from having to depart the battlefield, and effectively concede a defeat and give Pompey the edge. This would have been a huge victory for the anti-Caesar camp, if you like, and that was how Caesar was quite gloomily predicting that I can't stay here much longer. I'm screwed, and for the reasons of supplies and so on. So he. Again, it was a close run thing. If Pompey hadn't gone for battle and had just managed to hang out for another week or so, the result could have been completely different. So these are the moments of history when something can swing on an error, an oversight, a mistake, a matter of hours in timing, but it's enough to change the entire history of the region or sometimes the world. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.